All right, this video is on writing a system of inequalities given the solution. So this is if you have a graph and you're actually given the solution, so the double shaded area, and you need to go back and write what the inequalities themselves look like in y equals mx plus b form, but instead of equal, you'll use an inequality symbol. So we're going to write the system of inequalities that result in this given solution. So the double shaded area, or the darker shaded area, is the solution. Each of these lines and the shaded part, either above or below the line, will result in an inequality that we can write. So we're going to look at this line right here. So I'm going to start in y equals mx plus b form. So always think of y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is the y-intercept. Okay, but when we're talking about an inequality, we're talking about greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, instead of the equal sign. So we need to replace that with one of those symbols. And we have to look at which side of the line is it shaded on? And might say, well, it's shaded on both sides. So I'm going to start with y. I'm looking at the solid line, and it's solid, meaning if it's solid, it can include that line. So if it includes it, it's always or equal to. So it's either going to be greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. So with this, I have to look at, well, which side is the solid shade on? So it's the solid part is above my line. So that means it's greater than. So if you don't know how to look at, is it above or below? Well, if you look at the y-axis, are the y values where it's shaded greater than where your line goes to the y-axis? Or are they the numbers that are less than where your line goes through the y-axis? So my line goes through the y-axis right where y is -1. And the part where it's double shaded is these numbers on the y-axis are larger than it. So I know that my equation is y is going to be greater than or equal to. Now I need to write the rest of my equation. Another way you can tell that it's shaded above is if you look over here, we don't have any shading below in this one little area, meaning it was shaded above and this part of the shading came from our other line. So I know we have to ignore that, and all this shading is for this line. So I can now identify the slope and the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept's easy. It goes through the y-axis at -1. But the slope, I need to do rise over run, so I need to pick 2 points where my graph actually intersects with the coordinate grid. And I'm going to do rise over run between those 2 points. So rise is +1. Run, we're going to the right, so it's run is +2. So just put that into your equation. Y is greater than or equal to 1/2 x minus 1. So that's what this inequality looks like. Then you have to write the other one so you have your system. So it's dotted, or dashed. So we know it's not going to be or equal to. It does not include the line if it's dotted or dashed. So we have y, is it going to be greater than or less than? So the double shaded area is below the line, meaning it's going to be less than. And so I can look at where my line goes through the y-axis. It goes through at 3. And I can see that in the double shaded area, the y values on the y-axis are less than where my line goes through. So this shaded part came from this line that we talked about before. So if I'm just looking at this line, everything is shaded below. So that means y is less than, strictly less than, not or equal to because it's dashed. I have to find the slope and the y-intercept. So y-intercept, I'm going to start there, is 3. It goes through the y-axis at 3. Slope, again, I'm going to take 2 points where it intersects with the coordinate grid. I always start with the lower point, and I'm going to do rise over run. So my rise is up 1, my run is left 1, so it's -1. So 1 over -1 reduces to -1. So my equation, y is less than -1x plus 3. So y is less than the slope times x plus that y-intercept. So here is a system of inequalities that create the solution. Okay, let's do one more together. All right, so on this one, I'm going to start with this solid line. And I can tell that it's not going to be shaded above. It would be shaded below. And I am going to really look for that double shaded area. And yes, that double shaded area is below. So I look at the y values. I always look along the y-axis. So my line goes through the y-axis at +2. And the double shaded area where the y-axis goes through the double shaded area, those values are less than the y-intercept. So I know its y is less than or equal to, because it is a solid line, it has to be or equal to since it's solid. Slope, because it's y equals mx plus b. So we'll find the slope. I'm going to pick 2 points where it intersects with the coordinate grid. Remember, it can't be halfway in between. It actually has to intersect with the grid work. So I'm going to do rise over run. My rise is up 1. My run is right 3. So 1 over 3, or 1/3, x. So the slope times x plus the y-intercept goes through the y-axis at +2, so it's +2. That's one of my inequalities. I'm going to put in the other to get my system of inequalities. All right, this one's dashed. That means it's not or equal to. Start with y. I need to figure out if it's less than or greater than. So the double shaded area, or the darker shaded area, the y values are less than where my line goes through the y-axis, because the line goes through the y-axis at 0. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Those are all less than 0. So I know y is less than the slope times x. So I need to find the slope, so I'm going to pick 2 points where my line goes through the grid work. I always start with my bottom point. My rise is up 1, run is left 2, so that makes it -2. So 1 over -2, or -1/2 x. It goes through at 0, so I can put +0, but +0 doesn't mean anything. So it's actually y is less than -1/2 x. Because +0 is plus nothing, so I just leave it off. All right, so that's the system of inequalities that creates this solution. All right, so I'm going to have you go ahead and try 2 problems. And go ahead and pause it here. Here's your first problem. As soon as you press play, I will go through the answers with you. All right, so for the solid line, y is, it's shaded, double shaded is below, where the y values are less than the y-intercept, so it's less than or equal to. The or equal to is because it's a solid line. The slope, up 1 over 1. So 1 divided by 1 reduces to 1. So I have 1x, and the y-intercept is 1. So we can technically simplify this to y is less than or equal to x plus 1, because if you have 1x, there's an x there. So this is completely reduced. And our other inequality is y is, it's dashed, so it's strictly greater than or less than, but the double shaded area is below, so it is y is less than slope, rise 1, run -2, so -1/2 x, and it goes through the y-axis at -2, so -2. So that's your system. Those two together create your system of inequalities, where that's the solution. All right, same thing here. If you would please go ahead and try this problem, pause it here, and when you press play, I will go through the answer with you. All right, so I'm going to start with the solid line. This one's a little more tricky. So I'm going to look at, is it greater than, is it less than? So the double shaded area is on this side of my line. So if I look at the side of the line where it was shaded, well, it's shaded where the y values on the y-axis are less than my y-intercept. Even though the double shaded area is up here, I know that this whole side of this line had been shaded. So it is less than or equal to, because it's a solid line. Slope. We have rise 3, run 1. So 3 over 1 reduces to 3. X goes through the y-axis at -3, so -3. And this one we have y is shaded above, greater than, strictly greater than because it's dashed. Again, same thing with down here. You don't have the double shaded on the y-axis, but you can see for this line, it would have to be shaded above, and these y values are greater than where your line goes through the y-axis. So y is greater than, slope, pick 2 points, up 1, 1, 2, 3 over 3. So 1/3 x, and it goes to the y-axis at 1, so +1. Hopefully you understood that. So you're just creating the two inequalities to create your system of inequalities. So the trickiest part that I see most students struggle with is determining what the inequality symbol looks like. So really look at what side of that line it's shaded on.